Hi guys, Rich from Trackspark here. Hope you're all okay and looking forward to Easter. Welcome to another tutorial, this month's tutorial, which is on chopping up, chopping up or rearranging and layering up your live drum loops. And I guess specifically we're using the ones that we give you in your goodie bag packs. So excuse me. So yeah, let's get on with it. So just looking along the side, down the side here, what's good about these sort of live drum loops that we give you is I think these were from the last 2 or 3 months or so. This particular drum groove, and we've got a bunch of different loops themselves. Just different options there on a similar sort of drum groove, but also we've got the drum groove sort of split up. So we've got just a hi-hat loop, or we've got open hi-hats there, or we've got just a kick and just a snare, and also we've got these little groove fill. Sorry, I'll just stop that. Yeah, we've also got these little groove fills. So we've got the main groove, with a little fill on the end, and then a crash. So they're really useful to use as well. You can obviously use these just to sit under another sort of drum loop that you've got going on in a tune. But what I wanted was just a really nice live sounding kit. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. Yeah, a nice sort of live sounding drums to go in my track. Now, the drum loop itself, this is the original sort of drum loop here. The drum, I wanted to change it. I've not changed it a lot. You can, this is just sort of a way of showing you can change it as much, I guess, or as little as you want to. I've just added a couple of kick drums in there, so it meant splicing the whole drum loop, either splicing the original drum loop up into different sections. I've added a little fill there, or doing it a different way, which I will show you first. So here, let's just listen to the original drum loop. So that was one of the ones that I just sort of previewed for you in that side browser there, that side window. And as we can see here, it's named 70 with the name, and then I've got the BPM, 75 BPM. And my project is in 140. So I guess if you half that, because I've got it at double time, it would be 70 BPM. So I've just had to slow these, I've had to time stretch these loops and slow them down by 5 beats per minute. So not loads. So if it just sounded a little bit slower, that's the reason. Right, so anyway, going back to this. Now, what I'm going to show you how to do is to basically use those different elements that I showed you. So the individual hi-hats and the individual kick and snare loops to recreate this original drum loop. And the main reason for doing that would be to, like I said, to change the loop itself. So if the kick or the snare, if they weren't in the right place, I've only added a kick in a few places, in a couple of places for this loop here. But if they weren't in the right place, then that would be one reason for doing it, instead of taking the loop and sort of splicing it up into loads of different parts of the original loop, because that could get a little bit messy. You could get hits slightly out of time, so it wouldn't splice together perfectly. So this way you can get use the original nice sounding live hits and recreate the new loop that you want. You could say, oh, I'll just use normal samples and put it in a sampler, but then you haven't got the nice live if you do it that way, you haven't got the nice sort of live dynamics and the nice feel that you get from, you know, using a live loop. So anyway, right, let's keep going. Now, what I've got here is I've got a kick. This comes from my kick and snare loop, and then I've separated the kick and the snare onto different tracks. I've got an extra snare here, which I'll show you in a sec. Now, the reason for doing that is if I wanted to EQ the kick, then that's gives me more control and more options to be able to do that. And similarly with the snare, if I wanted to EQ the snare differently, then I've obviously got more control, like I said. And also, if I wanted to sidechain my kick drum to my bass, for example, then I've got that option as well. Or not, you know, could be bass, could be anything else. Vocals, like in the previous tutorials. So yeah, and then I've got another snare here, which is exactly the same snare from exactly the same loop, and I've called it snare pitched, and I've pitched it down. So let's just listen to the kick and the snare. Now you can hear, I don't know if you've noticed, I've just added a kick here. There was no kick here in the original loop, and there's no kick here. And like I said, I've added a fill from one of the fill, only the end, half a bar fill from one of the fill loops. Now that sounded a bit thin because I've got a high pass filter on, so let me just take that off quick. So here's the yeah, so there's my kick and snare from the kick and snare loop. What I've done is I've added an extra snare, so this comes into the layering part of the tutorial, and I've pitched it down. So let's just listen. So there we go. And if I add these two snares together, I've EQ'd out, you know, the low half here, the low frequencies, because I don't want to double up on those. And it just gives it more weight. So it gives that snare a nice bit of weight to it. Took it out. Yeah, so they're the kick and snare on separate channels. Now I've got an open hi-hats loop here. So let's add that in. Let's just solo this. Now what I've got here is the open hi-hats just playing half notes, and then here I've sort of double timed them to give us quarter notes, as just so you can see there. And let's listen to the original loop. And now let's listen to ours. By the way, here's one more I've taken from the end of the fills loop, which was just a crash cymbal. So I'll just mute that for the time being. So it doesn't sound too bad. It sounds a little bit sort of robotic, but you've still got the nice live sort of playing and the nice live dynamics. I've also added a closed hi-hat here, playing half notes, just to give us that extra sort of extra vibe in the top, sort of in the high frequencies. And if we were to listen to it, it still sounds pretty cool and pretty live if we listen to it in the mix of the song. So let's have a quick that's taking this original drum loop, just moving it around and splitting it up into its individual hits and layers, and then to rework the loop a little bit, and then also, like I keep saying, broken record, it gives me more control on EQing and just being able to layer up and give things a little bit more sort of weight, so that the snare, like I said, I added this snare just to help it sort of cut through and give it a bit more weight and punch in the mix. So that's one way of being able to layer up those live drum loops that we gave you. Now, I've got this track here, which is the original drum loop, but re-spliced to create my new drum loop. So I'm still not using the original groove. It's only a slightly changed one, but let's just have a listen to this. Now, if I'll just take this off here. So there it is. And like I said, I've added, let's just listen to this M bit, I've added a little fill. So what I want to do again is add those extra layers just to give certain things extra weight. I can give the kick some more low end, and I can give that snare some extra weight as well. Or if I wanted to give it some extra punch, I could EQ it in that way. And again, if I add these extra layers, I've then also got the option of side chaining, so it gives me that extra control that I keep banging on about. Right. So what I've first got to do, and also I guess I like the energy. I like the dynamics and the energy that I'm getting from this live spliced loop slightly more than my sort of chucked together loop, if that's what you want to call it. Individual parts all put together. If we listen to the loop itself, it's got a nice energy about it compared to these ones. I mean, I prefer this half of the loop. I mean, it sounds good, but let's again just listen to this. It's just got a slightly nicer vibe to it. So what I want to do is use this spliced up loop and then add some additional layers to it, just so that it's going to work better in my mix. So I'm going to get rid of these open hi-hats because I don't need those, because I've got them from my live loop. Now I'm going to keep this kick, I'm going to add this kick. So what I want to do is EQ out all of the low end from my full loop. So I've done it here. I've got a high pass filter going all the way up to around sort of 500 hertz and then coming down here. So let's just listen to that. So we're left with all the nice sort of high end of the snare and the hi-hat and the live vibe and the hi-hats, but we've got no bottom end to the kick. So what I'm going to do now is I've already obviously got my kick in place, and I'm going to put a low pass filter on it, so that we're left with a thud, but it's all the low end that I've cut out of this live loop. Yeah, so it's really thuddy and sounds weird on its own, but let's put it in with the full loop. Yeah, we've got all that low end again, and we've got again more control, so we can EQ it better, or we can bring it up or down in the mix if needed. So there's that extra control. And what I've got here as well, I don't know if you noticed, there was one kick here I couldn't quite get in my loop, so I've just added another one here and EQ'd it so that it sounds the same as the live loop. So that is all that is. Let's take these out. Right. So I've got my kick and my loop and my kick working together now. So, and I've got rid of my hi-hats, and I don't need my normal snare either, because I've got all the sort of the higher frequencies, mid-high frequencies and high frequencies from my loop. But I'm going to keep my other snare sample, which is pitched down, again, just to give it that extra weight. Let's just listen. If I take that low one out, just put it in, just gives it that extra bit of weight and body, which will help it in the mix. And then finally, I have my little sort of fill on the end here, which I have laid up with this snare again. But what I had to do is go in and make sure all the hits are, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily need to keep these in because it's nice to have the dynamic range, etc. from the loop itself. But I've EQ'd out the lower end here, haven't I? So it's just nice to keep something in there. And what I've done is I've gone in and made sure the hits are all lining up together, because if they were sort of on the grid, so to speak, then it would sound weird and wrong. So just make sure all your hits are in time. So, and then yeah, we've got that. Like I said, we've got that crash in there. So let's just listen to, and I've kept in this, like I said, the closed hi-hat on the half notes, just because I like it. Let's have a listen. So we've got the nice sort of vibe and energy of the full live drum loop there, with the extra sort of layers and elements to help us control the mix a little bit better. So let's just listen to see how that is sitting in the mix. There we go. So yeah, that is how to splice up your live drum loops, and also layer them up as well, just to help you better mixing. Nice one. Cheers, guys. Hope that was okay. And I will see you next month. Bye.